Good evening and welcome. Before I begin and call the meeting to order, a couple neat things. One, our owl is nesting and has a little egg up here to give us better sound quality. We're hoping that's working. And more importantly, it's great to have Councillor Briscoe back in council tonight. We celebrated on Sunday and had a beautiful breakfast on Saturday with the International Women's Day, and I couldn't think of a better time to have you back in council chambers. So I'm a little giddy. So welcome. So good evening and welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please remain standing if you're able for the land acknowledgement, a moment of silent reflection, and the singing of O Canada. And I'll remind you that when we get to the singing of O Canada, if we could sing loud and proud so our Paralympic athletes in Italy can hear us. So let's begin. We acknowledge that Stratford is positioned on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Neutral Androwandrans peoples. As we gather, we are reminded that the city of Stratford is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples today. We acknowledge that Stratford is situated on land that was shared between the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral Androwandrans peoples. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and play on this land. If we could just have a moment of silence. Thank you. Our city, Christ the true, more strong and free. Our we stand on our holy. Our King, our land, holy out and free. Oh, and love we stand on. Please be seated. Please allow me to share the Respect in Stratford statement. The Corporation of the City of Stratford is committed to providing quality service to all members of the public, council, and our employees. Our goal is to promote a safe, healthy, respectful, inclusive, and positive environment. We have a responsibility to treat people with respect by creating safe and respectful spaces. It is the city's expectation that all present will be respectful. Madam Clerk, the meeting is yours.
Sure, Your Worship. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? And if so, please state the general nature thereof.
Councillor Beatty.
In regard to item 7.5, I'm committee member that will be attending that event.
Thank you. Any other items? Councillor McCabe, go ahead, please.
Item 7.2, community grants. My wife is the artistic director of Pure Canal Theatre Company, so I will not speak to item number 4.
Item 2, 7.2.
7.2.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item.
Your Worship.
Oh, Councillor Burback, I'm sorry.
Thank you, through the chair. Also, item 7.2, interchamber is on.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you.
Item 3 is adoption of the minutes, and there is a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of Council of the Corporation of the City of Stratford dated February 23rd be adopted as printed.
Moved by Counselor Niger, second by Counselor Burback. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's unanimous and carried.
Item 4 is adoption of the addenda, and there's no addendum to be adopted. Moving to item 5, report of the committee of the whole in camera session. Item 5.1, the March 9th in camera session was canceled. Moving to item 6, hearings of deputations and presentations. Item 6.1 is an introduction of the interim police chief of Stratford Police Service.
Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to invite our interim police chief, who's on his way over, just to welcome Paul Landers here. I'm not going to speak too long about him because I think he's capable to do that on his own. He's already brought a fan club with him here at the back, but we are so happy to invite Paul here to the city of Stratford. It's funny, on Saturday I was going in between different events and I was stopped at a stoplight here on Erie Street, and somebody pulled up beside me and said, put his window down, and he said, "Great job on the interim chief hire." And that was rewarding for somebody from public to say that. So having said that, we're so very pleased to have Chief Landers here for the next year as we begin the search for the full-time permanent job. So I'll turn the podium over to our interim chief, and you can say a few words about yourself.
I'd like to start off by thanking council for allowing me this opportunity to come and meet and speak with you. It is truly an honor to be named as your interim chief of police. I must tell you that in my short time here, I have already noted the professionalism and dedication of the members of our police service, both civilian and sworn. I look forward to working alongside with the members to assist in bringing the members continually to bring adequate and effective police service to the communities that we do serve. My focus as the interim chief will be one of stability, of transparency, and being collaborative. I look forward to working with council, the police service board, and all of our community partners as we work towards the best possible solutions that we can find to ensure that we provide an effective, efficient, and experienced police service. I thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul did mention he comes via Stratford Care Doc, where he had a 35-year plus career with policing in that municipality. I told him he could stay for the rest of the meeting, but I won't look to see if he stays, so he's going to stay for a moment. But he will be moving fairly soon to Stratford, which is a big plus for the city. So, having addressed that, I'd like to now welcome Patricia O'Malley forward. So, it's a great honor for me to acknowledge Patricia O'Malley in her appointment to the Order of Canada. And I want to read the bio that was presented during the appointment. Patricia O'Malley, CM, Stratford, Ontario. Chartered professional accountant Patricia O'Malley has redefined financial reporting and standard setting. For leadership in developing and implementing the international financial reporting standard ensured greater consistency and transparency in accounting practices. This trailblazer has influenced the professional of the profession worldwide as one of the first women to serve in senior roles traditionally held by men. And once again, just repeating what I said earlier, I can't think of a better time to acknowledge a strong woman in leadership doing things that were once thought only men's jobs. So at this time, I'm going to be honored to recognize Patricia on behalf of the city of Stratford. I'll just step around you here. On behalf of the city of Stratford, come on over here so everybody can see you. And it says here, on behalf of the city of Stratford, I am pleased to congratulate Patricia O'Malley on being appointed to the Order of Canada on December the 31st, 2025, signed by myself, Margaret, for the mayor. Little round of applause for this. So I'm gonna invite Tricia to say a few words before she goes along and then it becomes acknowledged from council. But if you could just say a few words about the day off. Not that I'll ever be there, but I'd just like to live vicariously through your experience.
Well, the day was a long time coming because I got a phone call in the middle of October from an email saying, please call. And it was from the office of the Governor General. And I said, this is kind of fun. I was actually thought that it might be somebody that I knew had been nominated if they were checking references, but no. The first thing he said was, I wanted to tell you that you wanted to be your candidate. And sort of went, really? And so that was a very interesting, but then the point was that then it as you know, it wasn't announced until the 31st of December, and the whole rule was so like that was the longest secret I've ever kept.
Did you know about this?
I did, and I was formed to keep my mouth shut.
It's even harder.
Right.
So actually we did this well. I did break the rule on this one, December the 31st. I sent a note to close friends and relatives and said, Ron said he would be really mad if you read it in the paper, and I hadn't told you first. It turned out that they were actually not interested. The thing that I think is interesting about, like, I'm not a native Stratfordian, obviously, but this is now my forever home, and I'm really glad that Stratford was on the order now list. But I think it's interesting for people to know how unusual this city is in terms of the number of people who live here, who are members of the Order of Canada, and just because it's close to National Women's Day. There is going to be a presentation at the library on the afternoon of Saturday the 28th of a group of women called the Iris Collective, who's trying to get, support women, are having a presentation. There's 5 of us that could talk about members of the order talk about that. And so I think a couple of them everyone will know the room, and Shauna and we a couple of people I don't know, but found incredibly interesting. So I'm going to be really glad to meet them. So if people have time, it would be great for them to have a good turnout for that. And I think maybe we could have a project city to identify as many of those people as you
I'll take that challenge on.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna invite you to go along and shake the councillor's hand.
Congratulations.
So. Congratulations. We'll have you come back down to this way, so I can get this, and so I am so glad Winnipeg gave you up and gave you distracted. Well, I'm so glad, thank you very much. Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Your worship, item 7 is orders of the day. Item 7.1 is the asset management plan. As noted on the agenda, the manager of asset management is here to present the plan.
Thank you. We'll give the floor to Mr. Bose here in a moment. Welcome, and whenever you're ready, sir.
Your worship, thank you everybody for having me today. It's been about 11 months since I was here last with the 2024-2025 interim asset management plan, and we're here with the final stage of the Ontario regulations. So I'm going to go through some of it today. If you hold your questions till the end, I'm happy to speak to anything that comes up after. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the whole background of the history of the legislation and the act and all that kind of stuff. It was covered at length in my presentation last year. So let's kind of jump ahead. So with the pending adoption of this asset management plan by council tonight, the city will be in full compliance with Ontario Regulation 588.17. So phase 4 is what this is called as part of the regulation. So what this means is we now understand what assets we own, what service levels we provide, what it costs to sustain our assets, and the long-term affordability. So essentially what we're doing is we've shifted from the last asset plan, which was more or less an inventory, an asset inventory of the city, a really broad view of the city and what we own and what we have and the service levels we have. And what it's shifted now more towards is what we call a sustainability modeling tool. So the plan isn't just a bunch of data, it's something that we're going to use to make major decisions moving forward in the city. The last thing that phase 4 achieves is funding. So compliance with this regulation ensures that we will not be at risk for any financial implications for major grant funding that we get like OSEP. So for example, in the regulations that we do not have the current asset management plan adopted by council, that's in work and in progress and updating all that stuff, and then your funding will progress. So we're again pending the adoption of the plan, we'll no longer be a threat of that non-funding. So great. So why does the EMB matter now? So infrastructure is the city's largest investment. We have almost $2 billion in assets that is the full function of the city. It's our roads, it's our possible drinking water, it's our recreational activities, and much more. And it's not just a compliance document. So the province didn't intend on this being a compliance document that checks a box to make sure you get funding and then sits on the corner of the desk. It's intended to be a decision support to reform municipalities and to put structures and standards that we've been doing for many years, but to actually formalize them, put them in place so that current councils and future councils have a framework to work with when they're making major decisions on budgeting, major capital projects, all that sort of thing. So it's incredibly important. So part of the phase 4 requirements was that we entered into some community engagement. So what we did was we had a survey that went out, and we had several pop-up events throughout the city, Canada Day, Farmers Market, among others. So we had 235 responses to the survey, which I want to point out, that's a very notable result for the size of the survey. It was a very detailed survey, it was extremely long, and unfortunately it had to be because there was a lot of data that we had to get from people, and you know, so 235, it was actually a very notable result for a survey that long in detail. So just some of the quick high points of it. The highest satisfaction rates found with residents is parks and city facilities, lowest satisfaction roads, traffic flow. Highest priority for spending for residents was roads, water, wastewater, parks, and lowest was fire, police, and transit. And then a big component of the process was the open comment theme. So of the 235, about 150 people took the time to write some quite lengthy comments that we reviewed all of them and factored them in. So to kind of summarize them, roads were clearly the biggest infrastructure concern when looking at all the city's assets. There was calls to look at different service delivery models. There was a lot of interest in cyclists and pedestrian safety. And there was a lot of discussion on beautification spending, flowers and that sort of thing throughout the city. But the one thing I want to point out, the most common message was very clear throughout the whole process was residents want to see us maintain the service quality and delivery that we have now by utilizing our existing resources and how we're managing those as opposed to higher taxes, which really isn't a surprise. People don't want taxes to go up any more than they typically have to. But the reason I'm pointing that out now is when we were developing the asset management plan being presented tonight, We took the approach that we want to look at maintaining the service levels we have. Because obviously, there's three options. You can maintain your service levels, you can increase them, or you can decrease them. And all of those come with trade-offs and costs and that sort of thing. So, understanding the residents' desire to, keep taxes, palatable, and council's desire for that as well. That was kind of the main thing that we tailored here at the SFP plan. So let's go over some of the main data points from the plan. So as I mentioned earlier, we have about $1.8 billion in assets. So if you were to replace every asset the city owns today, there's about 37,000 of them. And that's everything from roads, fire hydrants, laptops, the chairs you're sitting in, like everything the city's it's accounted for. But I do want to make a note that when it's a living document, and at November 2025 is when I pulled the data on that one day. The next day that number already changed, but even if it was by a few dollars. So I just want to point that out that these numbers and figures, and that's why we come to council and we're going to do this update, and it's required by the regulations. But we're going to come once a year to update the data, the figures, just to keep everything transparent with what we have and where we're going. So I want to point that out. So our current sustainability position. So when we look at funding and the assets that we have, this is kind of the major breakdown for it. So as I mentioned, we have about $1.8 billion in assets. And based on the data we have, the average annual capital requirement that we need for that is about $32.3 million. And currently our funding that we have available for that, which is our transfers to reserves and the guaranteed funding models that we have, not guaranteed, but consistent like our OCIF, for example, that's where we pull out the available funding figures for that. So you can't use one-time funding. So if we got a one-time grant, $10 million to do a facility, that does not count to your funding because it's not a sustainable income or funding source you can rely on. So just wanted to point that out. So coming back to this annual requirement of 32 million. So how we come about this is we took all of the assets that we have in our database and we use a 100-year, what we call a life cycle. And it's the life of an asset. And the reason we use 100 years is because we want to ensure that all the assets that we have in the city go through at least one life cycle. So to give you an example of that, the sewer mains that run underneath our ground, we have 180 kilometers of sewer. Those can last anywhere from 75 to 100 years. So if we only do a scope of 50 years to see what our capital requirement is, we're going to be missing out on thousands and thousands of linear assets. So just to put in context, that's why we use the 100-year model. And I think this graph is interesting because it really shows that infrastructure spending doesn't occur evenly every single year. So what this chart shows is that the replacement needs occur in waves, and it's cyclical. So as assets reach the end of their useful life, and they do it around the same time. And during the periods leading up to those major investments, so if you look at the graph, you can see that between 2065 to 2060. Sorry, it's weird saying those years because they're so far ahead that it's not something to say about that. From 2055 to 2064, like you can see, this is a time where we're going to be building up our reserves because we have major replacements coming up. And then once you deplete the reserves and your assets are in better condition, you have to repeat that process again. That's kind of, you can see through that graph how it's a cyclical for the asset life cycle. And just to give a practical kind of real life example, a helpful way to think of this is kind of like personal finances. So early in your career, you have a lot of upfront debt when you're younger. You eventually purchase a house, purchase a car, you're paying more student debt. So you're very debt heavy at the very early start of your career. But later in life, that debt is paid down and your savings grow. So it's kind of the same framework as that. The only difference is asset life cycles don't come to an end. They just start all over again. So the same kind of practice that we all have in our lives, and so the goal of the asset management plan is not to end this, it's not to end the cycle, it's to manage the cycle responsibly so that each generation has its equity in how we pay for it. So it's not all taken up by certain decades. So capital funding in Ontario. So I put this slide in here because it's general nature. We want to compare our city to other cities of similar size and that sort of thing. So I want to go over some of this and explain how to interpret. So Stratford's funding challenges, it's not unique. In Ontario alone, in just bridges and roads, it's estimated there's about $44 billion of roads and bridges that are needed to repair. So I use that point to highlight that anything you see today, it's not a Stratford issue, it's not a Stratford data point, it's a province-wide, issue. So, and like I said, these asset plans, they're not comparable directly between municipalities because every municipality is different. We have different inventories, we have different road networks. Some have social housing as part of their city, some don't. So that's why I brought this chart up. You can see all the similar populations of Stratford, Leamington, Aurelia, Orangeville, but the replacement value of the assets, it's significantly different between. And you could go into detail as to why that is, but at a high level, it's because the infrastructure inventory is just different. And it just depends on what the city has. So I just want to highlight this because, you know, this is not something that you can use to compare municipalities to one another. And what's most important is not the size of the number or anything like that. It's how the municipality understands its infrastructure and the risks associated with the infrastructure they own, not comparing it to other cities. Financial sustainability. So I touched on this last year, but I just want to come back to it because it's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot in the budget and in the municipal world. So without definition, I think a lot of people would assume financially sustainable city is one that has a ton of reserves and all their assets are in good condition and everything's perfect. But that's not the reality of it. Financially sustainable in the setting of municipal context is that can it provide a level of service proportionate with the tax base is willingness to pay? Can we adjust service levels in response to changes in economic conditions, which we've just seen in the last 5 years? Can it adjust its capital plans in response to the change in the rate of population growth? And does it have sufficient reserves and or debt capacity to replace infrastructure and keep things in the state? So I put the second point in just to reiterate that the goal is not to have all your assets in very good condition. It's not possible for one. Like financially, it's not possible. And it's not realistic or feasible. So I just wanted to touch on it. So the backlog. So this is a component of the asset management plan that I wanted to highlight. So backlog can be looked at two different ways. There are two conventional ways to interpret it. Backlog can be assets that are past their useful life. So when you purchase an asset, let's say a laptop, you give it an estimated useful life of 5 years. So in the conventional sense, if you held on to that laptop for 7 years, it's theoretically in very poor condition. But the reality is that laptop could be in excellent condition. So what we've done with this asset management plan, because we've got such good data in the last 12 months as far as the condition of all the assets in the city, we've elected to consider our backlog assets that are in very poor condition. Because as I just explained, using just the age of an asset will often understate, it can potentially overstate the true state of the asset. Because like I said, a lot of our things last longer than they should. Asset conditions. So 76% of the city's assets are in fair or better condition. Like I said, in 2025, a significant amount of resources and staff time went into changing our asset data from that age-based rating to actual physical assessments done. And that was the main focus of last year, because what that does is once you have that good asset condition data, that affects your financial plan, that affects your backlog, that affects your long-term planning. So that is the most critical data point in the city's infrastructure program. And I just want to compare this. When I was here a year ago, it was the assets in the city was 56% were in fair or better condition. So that just highlights the importance of good data. And I also don't want to understate the fact that, in the last 3 or 4 years, a significant amount of infrastructure renewal has happened in the city. And that's in this term of council. So I just wanted to highlight that because we have improved asset condition, but I don't want to understate the fact that we have put a lot of investment into capital work in the last 4 years. Okay, so asset life cycle. So I just spoke briefly about condition of age-based versus visual inspections. I just want to use this graph to highlight the life of an asset. So this is a very short section of road. It's a 130-meter section of road in the city. So it was installed in 2013. So you can see at this point it's 100% condition. But and it's assumed that road should be good for 20 to 25 years. But if you do that, that says by 2038, your condition should be 0 if you don't do anything in between to maintain it. So in 2025, we had a road inspection program done by some consultants, and they determined that this section of road was rated at 91 out of 100. So if we had just gone by the age of that road, it would have had it somewhere around 50%. So I just want to use this as an example to show how important it is to not use just age-based data, but to use actual field inspection. And then this also to show how these life cycle, these different events that we do throughout the life of an asset can prolong its life and help the sustainability of it. So this road, for example, once it gets down to 70%, that's when we would go in and apply crack seal. That'll raise up the asset's condition again. Then once it gets to 70 again, we would do it a second time. You can only do that process so many times before it doesn't work anymore. So then your next stage, you would do a single lift, which is you replace the top layer of the asphalt. And again, that would bring it up. Again, you can't do that over and over again. So eventually you have to do a full, complete road reconstruction and bring it back up to 100%. So showing this life cycle of this road asset shows how, you know, it went from a 25-year life to a 44-year life. If we're doing these maintenance activities and we're using good data. So, okay, proposed levels of service. So in 2024, the asset management plan, it defined our current service levels. So it's what the city was doing at that time, what services we were delivering, and what the expectations were. What this version of the asset management plan does, it defines the proposed levels of service. So where we want to see our service levels over the next decade. And as you go through the plan, it's broken down by different appendices, city facilities, water, wastewater, transportation. Each one of the categories has their own level of service section of it. Where again, getting back to the earlier point that we have this focus on maintaining service levels. Because again, if we went through every service that the city offers and said we want to increase our service levels for you know, sidewalks, roads, water, rec centers, all that sort of thing, it comes at a massive cost. So what we're looking for at this point in time is to maintain the service levels. But I want to point out that our service levels can change at any time with council direction. It's not set in stone. This is something that can be altered. But what council has to start thinking at that time is what are the trade-offs? So if you want to increase service levels in one area without the financial impact on the taxpayer, and there's no other revenue stream, you might have to look at how does it impact something else? We go up here, we might have to go down here. Can we live with that? Is that what residents want? So again, these levels of service is something that again can be changed at any time with council's direction, but also we got to think about the consequences and unintended consequences that might have. So risk, and I apologize, this is a little blurry. So the asset plan includes an evaluation of risk, asset risk, and criticality. So what we do is we look at every asset and the probability of failure, how likely it is to failure, and the consequence of failure. So two very distinct things that will give you the risk of that asset. So, for example, the probability of failure is based on the condition. So if you have a fire hydrant that has a very poor condition rating, the probability of that hydrant failing is quite high. And then you have to look at the consequence of failure. Okay, is that hydrant located near a hospital, school, or is it on a residential street? And then what's the impact on the environment? What's the financial impact? So we have these risk profiles built into the asset plan. And one of the most important things and we have done a preliminary evaluation of all the assets, but what we want to do in 2026 is sit down with all the departments and perform a very specific risk assessment exercise with all divisions to look at every asset. We do this already with water and wastewater. It's a regulatory thing that we do every 2 years for the province. And what I'm planning to do is incorporate that exact same model we do for water and wastewater, but apply it to city facilities and transportation, all that sort of thing. And the whole point behind it is that it'll help staff and council decide on major projects because when the risks are assessed, it can help sometimes tip the scale when there's equal prioritization. So if you have 2 roads that need to be replaced, they both have a 25 out of 100 rating. One's a residential street, one is a road that services a school or is within a buffer of a hospital or something like that. Then you can look at these data points and look at the risk of doing one or the other. And then that can help you make these decisions and it can help infrastructure services do that for long-term planning as well. So the plan as a municipal tool, I've been kind of talking about this throughout, but just to kind of sum it up, again, it's it's intended to help the city, with their financial decisions support framework. So because we have all these data points, condition, life cycle, capital forecast, funding sources, it lets us really evaluate the affordability of our major projects that we have coming up and for the future. So, and like I said, we've been doing a lot of these asset management principles in practice for 10 plus years. We do it through our budgeting, through our policies, through our reserve stability, all that sort of stuff. What's changing now is not the fact that we're doing it, we're maturing the practices that we've been doing. So formalizing it in this plan through the province, it creates better transparency, stronger long-term planning, and it helps with council's turnover as well. Because there's a framework in place, there's all this data in place that if there's a new council in 4 years, that there's that continuum of the data and how we're planning to do things in our 10-year deadline. And probably the most critical point is understanding how major projects show up in the plan. So as it was discussed in the GTR workshop a couple of weeks ago by the CAO, we want to use the asset plan to help inform council on major decisions for major projects that we have coming up with you. So for workshop number 3, staff's going to be looking at coming to council with a number of data points, including the asset plan, our 10-year capital forecast, funding sources, debt obligations, and the asset plan's role in all this is to give a consolidated view of our infrastructure capacity, essentially. So when you're looking at the financial side, you now have all these data points of the actual infrastructure and the asset health of the infrastructure, and really help determine, okay, if we're going to do this major project, we got to think, we have this big backlog, we have a deficit, how is it going to impact everything? How does that work with our debt repayments? How does that work with our reserve money? So it's a major tool to really help shape those decisions. And it does it in 3 main ways. So a major project will increase lifecycle costs. So as was spoken about at the workshop last time, a $20 million facility, for example, is not a $20 million decision. Because that facility is going to come with operating costs, it's going to come with component upgrades and updates, accessibility changes, and legislation over the life of that facility. And then at the end of the facility, if you have to replace it, then it's not going to cost $20 million at that point. So again, it's taking all these data points to make sure that we have everything puts together. So yeah, just a couple more slides left. One aspect I want to touch on, or one theme, whatever you want to call it, it's this idea of intergenerational equity. So I specifically mentioned it in the plan several times as a recurring theme, because I really want it to be something that it's something that council already does consider, but now that you have all this data in front of you, it's understanding how you can use that to further your decisions. So intergenerational equity means that each generation pays for the services and infrastructure that it benefits from. So infrastructure, as I just explained from the last example, it's less expensive in the early days and early part of its life cycle compared to later when rehabilitation and replacement, all that occurs. So today's generation of tax and ratepayers would pay significantly less than the cost of the infrastructure for the next 2 or 3 generations. So what we have to keep in mind is, when you're considering major projects, who benefits, for how long, how we pay for it, and over what time period. Does the funding strategy fairly distribute these costs among different generations? And will future taxpayers face increased pressure because of today's decision? Right? So it's a very critical theme that we need to make sure is consistent through our decisions moving forward. Because when we underfund replacement today, we're putting that burden on the future generations to then deal with all the infrastructure flying apart in the future. We're just shifting the cost to another age group. But conversely, we want to avoid over-investing too early and then asking today's taxpayers to pay all the upfront costs for assets that they might not use, 20, 30 years down the road. So the plan kind of helps strike the balance by allowing us to look at the corporation as a whole in this one document, that when you're making decisions, you have all this data for both on here inside. So yeah, the recommendation itself, obviously the main one is that the report be received and that be adopted, but there's 2 other points that I just wanted to highlight that aren't necessarily tied to the plan itself, but in 2025, when the city had proceeds from a sale of a property on Vivian Line, there was about $2 million that council asked us to come back at the time of the asset management plan with a recommendation on how to spend that. And given that the theme of a lot of the public feedback was the road infrastructure, we're recommending that 1.8 million of those unallocated proceeds go into the public works reserve so that we can, use that for future funding for road reconstruction. And then another, at a separate council meeting, there was a discussion and for us to look into the community improvement plan for the heritage facade masonry loan program. So we took a percentage of that and have earmarked it for that program, which is still being developed. It's being able to take, but we want to take the funds from that to at least get it started and have a base to work on it. And if that gets spoken to separately, I might not be able to speak to that one as well, but. Okay, and yeah, so thank you for letting me speak. I could nerd out on this for hours and I'm not gonna bore anybody any longer than that, but yeah, well, my hope with this planning presentation is to have council understand that the intent of the plan isn't to have you or future councils commit to financial investments. The idea is that I want to show how the plan can be used as a tool, like to make these major decisions. And I think it's going to incorporate well with the CAO's long-term plan for what we're going to be doing coming back to council with major projects in Grand Trunk, for example. So, yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
I think if Councillor Henderson, go ahead, please.
Through the chair, thank you for this excellent presentation. I never thought I'd get so excited about asset management.
No, maybe.
It's like, I can't even imagine that you're gonna get through 37,000 projects this year. That's quite ambitious. Staff with this, but you know, when the project first found this, like, this really is a good tool. Like, you know, the way you put it together and how we can plan what we're gonna do and how our offsets and that. I mean, I know we kind of do that with a lot of things now, but it really brings it together. And thank you for an excellent report because it was very clear, concise, and easy to read.
And yeah, to that point, and that's what I was alluding to at the start is a municipality can do one of two things with the plan. Like I said, they can tell the province, hey, we got this done, keep our funding coming, and carry on business as usual. Or you can take the plan, actually implement it, and you're not going to be a static municipality if you do that. You're actually looking long term and planning long term, properly and accurately. And that's the whole point again of this regulation, was so that we have these tools in place for municipalities to not put this burden on future generations. So yeah.
Your other comments or questions? Councillor Burbeck, go ahead, please.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, thanks again for this report, and it really is interesting actually to see the quality of the data that's improved between what you had last year and what you had this year.
Right.
You know, and thanks for the work that you've done, and I do think it's going to be really valuable tool for us to use moving forward. I did have a question about the unallocated proceeds that are going to go to the Public Works Capital Reserve. Just curious, I know that when we had this discussion at council, I was definitely gung-ho as the chair of infrastructure, transportation, and safety that this go back into our roads infrastructure. And we do see from the feedback from the survey that was sort of the number one priority from the public.
Right.
The other priority that I saw up there was sort of cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. So I'm wondering, but when I see Public Works Capital Reserve, I think potholes, like filling, like, as opposed to perhaps a different reserve, which may be project based, where we can get some of that infrastructure modified so that it can accommodate cycling and pedestrian. So maybe it's just like a question of how do you envision the money that's going to go into Public Works Capital Reserve to be
I can answer this one. It will fund the next 50 years of capital works projects that are identified through the budget and through the forecasting tools that we use. So certainly, for anything that's inside the asset management plan that requires replacement or refurbishment, those projects they already do appear in our 10-year forecast. So that's how it would get dispersed between that and any, I'll say, grant funding or transfers to reserves, that could just become part of that long-term financing strategy.
Other questions? Councillor McCabe?
To the chair, Manager Rose, thank you for putting it together and for keeping up with us here on this. I'm really happy to see this because when I came in as a councillor, this was all very opaque. We had some real fuzzy numbers, in my opinion, about what our assets look like, how much we were behind. And now I feel comfortable understanding where we might be as a corporation, city. And, you know, combining that with some strategic priorities of council, you really have some direction about decisions that are made at budget time now, where the, you know, the key areas that we need to be focused on. So it makes council's decision a whole lot easier, having this background information. So I really appreciate the work that went into it, and I feel comfortable in the way, the direction of the company.
Yeah, and just on that note, through your worship, a big thank you to all the departments and the CMT group especially. They did a lot of data, like even themselves going out and looking at equipment and writing down, like, I just want to also acknowledge them that they did, the director did a fantastic job on it. And some problems for that too. So, thank you.
Other comments, Councillor Niger.
Yeah, for the mayor, thank you, great. And Councilor Henderson, you know, mentally, you got very excited over this, great data. At the end, you know, we don't have data, we don't know if we're good or bad, right? And it's all kind of a guesswork. So this actually gives us a real kind of, when we're making decisions, you know, if we're all putting it there or what have we, been excited this framework, you know, for us.
Yeah, and one thing that I was envisioning for this too also is it's a good training tool. So not only for staff, new staff coming into the city and working, like maybe not to read the whole 300-page document, but if you come into community services, for example, and you focus in on the city facilities dependencies, you can right off the bat get a good overview of what's happening. And one of the recommendations too that we put in there is after the next election, that part of the council onboarding is that there's a specific section just for asset management. So rather than it be part of the finance orientation, that'd be its own thing. And again, to use this as a training document as well, not just yeah. That's great.
Other comments? Seeing none, thank you for your work and to reiterate the work of the entire staff.
Yeah.
And also our CAO. It's a team approach, and the end product has been outstanding. A product that we're going to be able to use for years to come. Thank you. Dan Clerk, turn it back to you.
Voted on the agenda, there is,
Councillor, back. Did you have a question?
I was gonna move this up.
Oh, no. Okay, thank you. Councillor Niger will second. Call the question, all in favor? Did you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I did have a question about the $1.8 million. Has this already been accounted for previous budgets, or is this going to, is the idea that this will offset transfer for future, or is it in addition to, or has it been accounted for already?
Director Krugman.
Through the chair, I give you for the 1.8 million, yeah, so that it would augment our current transfer to reserves. The intent is not to reduce or decrease our transfers. We're looking to, I'll say, slow the pace potentially as we move forward, because we've been really increasing those transfers the last few budget years. But it, like we need sort of everything that we're dedicating towards the capital program each budget year. So this would just help to, I'll say, help with some of the infrastructure backlog and just make the next 10 or 20 years less painful.
Councillor Henderson.
Through the chair, a question then, are we planning to increase how much we're going to put away towards asset management then in future budgets?
To the chair, we've been really doing this the last few years, at least since I've been with the city. We've really been increasing our contributions to the reserves to help sort of reset our baseline as far as what we're putting in need. So I haven't prepared any budget documents for the future years just yet. What I do envision is that our transfer to reserves will continue to be increasing each year, but just not quite as fast of a pace as they've been the last few years.
Any other comments, questions? So item 7.1 has been moved and seconded. If there's nothing further, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed of any? That's unanimous and carried. Thank you.
item 7.2 is the 2026 Community Grant Evaluation Committee recommendations. And there is a staff recommendation that the 2026 community grant recommendations one-time and multi-year as outlined in the attached summary to the report be approved. And that any appeals received from the applicants be considered by council. And I would just know, both Councillor Burbeck and Councillor McCabe declared on importance of this item.
Thank you. Comments, questions? There is a motion before you. Councillor Hunter, will you move?
Yes.
Thank you. A seconder for such. Councillor Briscoe, thank you. Discussion, Councillor Burbeck.
Thank you through the chair. So if we could take item 4, I also forgot that I am a board member on the Here for Now Theater Company. So I will not be voting on item 4. We could take that separately, and item 6 is the other one. So yeah, they could be removed and voted on separately then. Great.
And Councillor McCabe, is it just 4 or 4 and 6?
Just 4.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, there is a motion, so we will deal with the motion first. Why don't we deal with the motions on the floor, but we'll deal excluding 4 and 6. Is that fair for you? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed of any? And that's unanimous and carried. And then moving over to the motion with just number 4, correct? That's what I'm looking for. All in favor? Opposed of any? And that is carried, and let the minutes show that Councillor Burbeck and Councillor McCabe did not participate in discussion or vote on that item. Thank you.
We're now number 6.
I thought we had done 6 there, but we have a motion for 6. Moved by Councillor, is motion 6 already moved or hasn't been moved yet? It has been moved, yes. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed of any? And that's carried, and let the minutes show that Councillor Burbeck did not participate in the discussion and or the vote. Thank you.
Item 7.3, the 2026 tax rates and tax policy matters, and our Director of Corporate Services would like to provide some information on the tax calculator that's available on our website. Or you have it loaded up here.
Okay, perfect.
Director Kruger, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Perfect. I just wanted to take this opportunity while we're talking about taxes and tax rates to remind the council and the public that we do have this property tax calculator tool. So on our website, we implemented this last year, the year before last, pardon me. And what it does is it allows you to enter in your property tax information. If you have a residential property, I'm going to get you to drive this while I talk. And we say you have our property valued at $350,000. You can hit calculate, and what it will do is it'll tell you how much of your tax dollars goes towards each kind of functional area. So just looking at the top part here, the summary. So of your $6,164 in taxes, $4,500 goes towards operating expenses, $1,095 goes towards capital, $535 towards education taxes. So that's just kind of the overview. But then if you scroll down a little bit further, you can kind of see for operating, it breaks it down even further. So the first one there, out of your operating, sorry, can you scroll up just a touch for again? So out of the $4,500 in related to operating expenses, $979 goes towards policing, $632 towards fire, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of, it outlines how much of tax dollars go for the sections for operating. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, it talks about, it shows sort of, so just taking on policing, for example, we had $939 of operating. We have $70.55 for policing for capital purposes. So it just kind of gives a better idea of where those tax dollars go. We all get those questions from people in the public. So this allows them to kind of enter that information. And if you go up, if you scroll up to the top again, you can, taxpayers can enter this information if they have non-residential properties. So they can choose farmland, commercial, industrial, multi-res, and they can find a similar breakdown. So for those times when we get asked, where do my tax dollars go, or how much am I spending on tourism or whatever, then that information is available by property type and by assessment. So I just want to point it out because I think the tool is pretty cool. So thank you.
Thank you.
And through your worship, as noted on the agenda, there is a staff recommendation that the report be received for information, that council approve the 2026 tax rates and tax ratios, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the bylaw to set the tax ratios, rates, and reductions for the prescribed subclasses for the year 2026, and govern and regulate the finances of the city.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McCabe, second by Councillor Hunter. Discussion. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, through the mayor. I would like to see the option number 2 under the options to consider to be considered for it. And when I'm reading this, I'm thinking it would have to be for the 2027 budget year, but that would be to reduce the multi-unit residential tax rate by the 10%. The reason why you'd have to see that happen is right now, the older multi-unit residentials are paying a rate of 2.0 and the newer ones are paying a rate of 1.0. And just on some of the boards that I'm on that are offering affordable housing, that tax rate, if it was beginning to be reduced and become on par, it would really be helpful in maintaining the renter to income and affordable housing units that are in these buildings. But I would like to see that. So I don't know if I don't even know how to, if that's an amendment to the motion, because I don't think that's part of the staff recommendation. So I will need some guidance.
Ask Director Kruger for some information and perhaps some guidance.
Sure, through the chair, thanks for that. And again, this was something that was brought forward last year, so we didn't put it as part of the proposed recommendations. There are a couple of ways that we can go about this. One is that council could direct staff to take it back and adjust the rates for 2026. It's not too late to do that. We haven't passed that bylaw yet. That is something that we could consider for 2026. It would result in that shift that's discussed within the report. But the other alternative, as I think you were alluding to, is if council wants to direct staff to include this reduction in the 2027 budget deliberations or budget proposals rather, then we can go ahead and do that so that our draft budget is inclusive of this.
Councillor
That
Bean.
would be my intention, so I would like to make that a motion or amendment to it and see if anybody would support that for the 20.
And I'm just looking to the clerk, just wondering whether that could be a separate item for the 2027, whether that could be a separate deferral too, and yes.
Separate.
So let's make it separate. We'll get into this. Let's address the current motion on the floor and then bring it back as a separate for 2027. Okay. Councillor Burbank.
Thank you to the chair. Yeah, just a question, Director, about, so when we look at the different tax rates, it's residential / farm. And then we have another section down below that says farmlands and farmlands with development. So just some clarification on the difference of what is that farm that's up there with residential.
For sure, thanks through the chair. Good question. It's always confusing for many people, so thank you for the clarification question. Typically when the way the impact splits the assessment values is they refer to the house and 1 acre per farm properties as residential, so that gets classified the same as residential. So they use the descriptor residential / farmland. The remaining farmlands get taxed at a much lower rate for like 25% of the residential rate. So they're classified in their own category for just the lands themselves.
Other questions? Follow up.
That just also a question about, so farmland waiting for development, we have some curious of why the assessed value is 0. So it says opening CBA assessment, it's because it doesn't have an assessed value yet.
Through the chair, we don't have any farmland awaiting development currently. Any lands assessed as farmland awaiting development.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Seeing none, I believe item 7.3 has been moved and seconded. I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's unanimous and carried. And then I'll turn back to Councillor Bean for your motion.
Sure, thank you to the mayor, and I feel like the clerk will be better to help me, but to make the motion that for the 2027 year that we would love to reduce the multi-unit residential tax rate by 10%.
Okay, a seconder for that. Councillor Briscoe will second. discussion, Councillor Henderson.
Chair, I have a question about that. I thought originally that I kind of think it was the parking on St. Vincent Street. I thought when they were developing that, that's when we came out with the lower rate for new, like multi-residential, so that we could encourage builders to build apartments. So if we decide to go to the older apartments and say we're gonna lower your taxes, I don't wanna be rude, but I find it very hard to believe they're gonna reduce the rent. So I don't see how it's gonna help. It's gonna help the landlord not pay as much taxes. But I thought what we were trying to do by having that lower rate was encouraging more apartments to be built in the city, because they were paying a higher rate. So I'd be opposed to this in how I'm thinking about this right now.
Director Kruger, any comments on that?
Through the chair, that was the initial intent of establishing the new multi-residential classification. What's happened though, as a sort of maybe a byproduct of all of this, is that we have older units and we have newer units, and they're assessed and taxed differently. So if they're whether, without speaking to how landlords operate or what benefits tenants get, there is an inequity that's built in now into our ratio and into our property structure. So the intent would be that, with Councillor Bean's recommendation, that we're just getting to a place where those properties can then be equalized. Because currently, even if you do have say a landlord with the older multi-residential, they're not able to reduce it even if they want to, because they have to pay those taxes at that higher ratio. So that's just something to consider, but it's just to highlight the fact that there is an inequity, and so it doesn't mean that there's going to be any more or less units built or available or anything like that. It's just to try to address the fact that, you know, the older building owners don't really have any capacity or incentive to renovate or to update their buildings, because they're already taxed at a higher rate. So it's to try to get them on an even playing field.
Councillor Anderson, go ahead. Follow up.
So wouldn't we be better than to say that when a new apartment building is built, they get the 1%, for say 5 years, and then it slowly starts to increment to bring it up to what the older one you think? And then a follow up to that is, what are the rates for other cities? Are they comparable to the 2%, or? I mean, I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot, I don't know how, but.
Director Kruger.
But I would rather see, say, any of the new apartment buildings that are more than, say, 5 years old, now start to increase, say, 1.5, 1.5, and then when we get up.
Through the chair, so we're not talking about tax rates, we're talking about the ratios. We're talking about the portion, like the relative proportion to the residential tax rate ratio.
Right.
So residential at a ratio of 1 across the board.
Right.
These newer ones are at a ratio of 1 across the board. The older ones are at 2.
Right.
So that means that they pay 2 times the amount of taxes essentially as the newer ones. So we don't get to set the tax rate or the tax ratios specifically. We can operate within the province's ranges of fairness, which for residential or multi-residential is between the 1 and the 2. So we don't have the ability to increase residential ratios. We don't have the ability to increase the new multi-residential ratios. We can only, if somebody comes along now and builds a multi-residential unit, they're gonna get the new ratio regardless. This was just I'll say a timing issue from when that new ratio was implemented. So these older buildings that just happened to be in place before that new ratio came into place are just they were kind of just stuck with that old ratio. So that, I don't know if that helped anybody.
Yeah, that helps. Can I just follow up again? So then, before I would go on something like this, I need to know how much property taxes we would this. There's quite a few old buildings.
Director Kruger.
Through the chair, I did calculate that in preparation for the budget this past year. And it was approximately like $250,000, I'm gonna guess off the top of my head from memory. So that's the amount of tax dollars that would not be lost, but would be shifted to the other tax classes. So instead of the older multi-residential buildings paying that amount, that $250,000, it would shift onto the rest of the other classes. Much of the other classes is residential, the kind of the regular residential or the new multi-residential, but also the industrial and commercial classes would pay a portion of that as well.
That's the total cost of all the buildings or
In one building for the 10% phasing in. So it would roughly work out to be approximately $250,000 for each of the 10 years. That gets shifted.
for like all the buildings?
All of the older multi-residential, yes.
So Councillor Bean's hand and then Councillor Hunter.
Thank you to the mayor. So just for communication, and the reason why I'm doing it is the buildings that I'm specifically dealing with or helping to look at finances for. It's what it's doing is that their reserve funds are very difficult to build up to actually maintain the building, and because of the age, like sometimes the plumbing all of a sudden just gone and they have to put all this money, and if they don't have the reserve funds, they can't keep the rates lower for the rent. So then what you're doing is you start to lose the lower cost of rental units in that building to make up for the need for the reserve funds to be built up. So I feel like when it comes down, like even by 10%, that starts to give some breathing room for them to keep their reserves built up a little bit without having to raise the rent. If that makes sense. That's my intention for it. That's the practical, like, moving around what I feel like the effect that it would have on a specific building is that it would allow them to have more of the reserve fund for the repairs of the age of the building. Okay, that's my intent.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. I was under the impression the new multi-res rates were temporary. Is that not the case? I thought they were good for 10 years and then they.
Through the chair, it's 35 years,
Oh,
and they're allowed at that ratio.
Okay.
But so that's actually a good point. So after the 35 years, a new multi-residential building would revert to the multi-residential ratio. So theirs would double after 35 years essentially. If we haven't, I'll say, corrected this inequity.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, go ahead.
Thank you. Is the intention of the motion to have this brought back during budget deliberations to then decide based on sort of their numbers from staff? Is that the intention?
If I could, through the clerk, I believe it was for the 2027 budget. Was that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
So it will come back, Councillor Seven. Thank you.
Through the chair, just on that, so the budget process was a lot different, as we all know, this past year compared to previous years, and will probably look similar to 2026's process going forward. So while I will highlight it, it will be likely embedded in the draft budget that comes before the mayor and for.
Councillor Hendricks.
Through the chair, just one more question. So this $250,000, do you know approximately how many buildings that was?
Through the chair, not off the top of my head. No, I can bring back some more information on that if Matt was interested in it, but
Okay, you can talk about that question.
Councillor Seven, go ahead.
So just another follow-up, would it be possible to have, because I think without it in front of me to decide, and I think I start to understand both sides, and I don't know that I'm prepared to sort of make that decision without, the information in front of me, and so I don't know, would it be possible to have it as part of deliberations rather than, I'm just worried that if it's sort of implemented, put in based on this motion, that it'd be hard to sort of pull it back out and have that. I'm not sure if I'm being clear, but will it be a separate item or will it be already in the budget and I have to take it back out?
Director Cruz.
Through the chair, so as you may recall from the last budget deliberations, there wasn't really a deliberation, it was the mayor's budget presented. So with this direction, if this motion is approved, then I will build that within the budget that's brought forward. The mayor's direction could differ and that could change theoretically before that happens. But like I said, I would definitely be highlighting this as an item for discussion, whether it's included or excluded, depending on the mayoral direction at the time, for discussion at that point.
Thank you. CNO, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. Just to add one point of clarification. So in regards to the strong mayor legislation now,
The mayor brings forward the budget, which council talks about. But that's a very separate decision than tax policy. Tax policy is up to council. And tax rates become up to council. So they are very separate conversations. As the treasurer stated, it gets brought forward because council wants to know what the tax rate increase looks like when we deliberate budget, but they are very separate conversations. So they can be done at any point in time, during, after, before that process.
Councillor Anderson.
Sorry. Yep. So in 35 years, say that one in St. Vincent was the one that was built, it's probably 5 or 6 years old now. It's gonna go to 2%, and the older buildings, if this passes, will be less, or will they go to the current rate?
Through the chair, so in 35 years, let's say that we dropped the 2 down to 1.2. We're not all the way there, but let's say we dropped it down to 1.2. Then the new multi-res would go to 1.2. It wouldn't go all the way back up again to the 2. The 2 would be long gone. So every time, if we go forward with this proposal, the intent would be that we would drop that old multi-residential ratio by 10% every year until it's fully gone and everybody's at 1. That would be the intent.
Councillor Anderson.
So we're trying to find ways to make taxes less for everybody in Stratford. Instead, what we're kind of looking at right now is lowering it on older buildings. And we have a lot of residents that live in older buildings. I'm sure they're gonna be kind of upset about that. Because we're only talking apartment buildings, right? Like anything that's 4 or more.
Residential.
So, you know, I'm thinking of fairness because they too have plumbing issues and, you know, roof replacements and all different things. And, you know, we're supposed to, as residents, budget each year, put so much away in our reserves so that when everything's replaced with a plumbing. And so should people like that are landlords running apartment buildings. And things like that, right? So I guess I'm really against this. But I don't think it's fair.
Councillor Briscoe and then Councillor B.
This is, after we already created quite well, that it's more of a prevention mechanism and there is a savings, because it essentially works, and oversimplifying it, but it does work to essentially freeze rates where they are. So it is still a saving, because likely you would have seen your rent go up to $200 to compensate for inflationary repair costs and things like that. So no, it's not being reduced by 200, there's also not going up. So it is a savings and it is a preservation mechanism then for especially because and the part of the repair is really critical because we want to incentivize updating these buildings, because what we're seeing in more areas or other centers is that there is actually an incentive to essentially run the property into the ground to its the point where it needs complete renovation, and that's when we see these renovations. When people are displaced from their homes, they're completely renovated and put it back at a much higher cost. So this is a way of preserving affordable supply at current rates, as well as maintaining that supply in our housing ecosystem.
Thank you, Councillor B.
It basically was the same thing, thank you to the mayor, it was just basically that money has to come from somewhere, so if we don't reduce by the 10%, it'll come from rent, so.
Councillor Bean and then Councillor McCabe.
Thank you.
I mean,
yeah.
7, I'm sorry.
No, I would be inclined to agree with Councilor Henderson. I think I have a hard time believing that it will impact the rates on older buildings. I think I would hazard to guess that the reason the rate is lower and then goes up after 35 years is because then in theory the borrowing is then done for the owner of the property, and then when you have the older properties, they're also assuming that potentially the borrowing is done for them as well. I think, you know, no matter how we frame it, it's still increasing the tax burden on everybody else to do this. I have a hard time sort of agreeing on that. I know that if this passes, we'll have a further discussion about it, but at this time, I would be inclined to oppose.
Councillor McCabe and then Councillor B.
To the chair, I don't know if anyone knows other municipalities that have put forward motion to do this shuffle. Do we know?
Director Kruger.
Chair, that has been the direction that most municipalities have gone, is to reduce that not all municipalities had a multi-residential ratio of 2 to start with. Some of them had 1.5, some of them had like some other number between 1 and 2. They couldn't exceed 2. 2 was the highest at whatever back in the day. So yes, most of them have made those strides to reduce those ratios so that the housing, like residential housing units, whether they're homes, whether they're newer multi-residential or older multi-residential, are on a level playing field. This was a recommendation that we had from our tax consultant last year when they came, was to use this mechanism to I think Councilor Briscoe kind of said it best, to kind of freeze or sort of keep some flexibility for those older multi-residential properties to be able to save or to not have to increase rent by quite as much, giving them that part of thing. But I will say the way that the ratios work, there aren't a lot of options that we have to shift those burden. And while I don't have any inside information, I do expect that this step, if it's not mandated at some point in the future, it would surprise me because of the effort to protect our residential unit, our housing stock. So.
Follow-up?
The follow-up is, so we have an extreme equity between older multi and residential and new builds in cities, which I think I noted earlier when looking through the tax documents. So this is just a way to ensure that we are reducing that over time and also could not leave ourselves open to an extreme rewriting of the tax rates at a future date.
Councillor Bean and then Councillor, did you have your hand again? Did you already? Yes, go ahead.
So just to kind of get, I guess to state the case again, but so a building, even if the loan is up, the maintenance and the operation of it still costs a lot, and as they age, that increases. And then the whole point that I have in it is that we are like one building I specifically know of, it has 75% of the rooms from our rent here to income in that building. And for them to maintain the rate of 75% being low cost affordable housing, there has to be give, and part of the give, and this across the whole city to help absorb. I guess I feel like the story where community comes in, like that is what would allow for these buildings, and maybe not every apartment landlord has affordable housing in their building, but specifically the ones that I know that would benefit from it, it would allow them to more likely maintain those rent to income units rather than when someone moves out, they renovate it and put it up to market, which is what has to happen to maintain their reserve funds without the proper exercise.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
So could we add to that recommendation that you have to have at least one affordable unit in the building to get the reduction?
No, through the chair, the legislation is such that we can't tinker with it. It's the ratios apply to the entire class regardless. So it's one of those things that's prescribed.
Councillor Seven and then Councillor.
Thank you. I just have 2 questions. Am I remembering correctly that consultant mentioned that once we reduce the ratio, we no longer have the authority to put it back up? Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, and then thank you. And then my other question is, do we know the ratio of rent due to income affordable housing versus other market rent under the multi-residential category?
That's a great question that I don't have an answer for you today, but I can get into that.
Councillor Burbank.
Thank you to the chair. So question, once an older multi-residential building is sold, does it maintain that older higher tax?
Yeah,
right. Okay, so the reason I'm asking that to follow up is if we take a scenario of a building that you've probably owned for maybe 35 years, and that I think that would be a stretch to say that somebody's going to own a building, build it, and own it for 35 years. So if you go to sell it, and it's 30 years from now, that people will know, you know, this building's tax rate is gonna go up exponentially in the next 5 years. I think that would reduce the value overall of that asset. Where you're trying, it would affect resale values and the willingness of people to actually invest in some of those older buildings that we need. So I think making it more fair reduces some of those traps that can affect the value of the buildings in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Burback. Any other discussions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? And that is carried. Next item.
Item 7.4 is the implementation of a directly operated licensed home child care agency. And there is a staff recommendation of the report. We received information that council authorized staff to proceed with establishing a new directly operated licensed home child care agency. We operated by the city of Stratford. That one full-time equivalent home child care visitor be authorized in addition to the city's current staffing complement meet the legislative requirements of a licensed home child care agency.
The mover for that item, moved by Councillor Henderson, second by Councillor Burback. Discussion. Councillor Bean.
One question I had, which I unfortunately did not send ahead of time. If the province changes the funding with that CLO program, or would the city then be on, like, would we be responsible to keep those running if the funding was decreased or eliminated?
Through the chair, it would be a business case to take a look at, but there is the chance, you know, to see that good. But we would look at the business case and then see what was viable at the time.
Other questions? Councillor Burback, go ahead.
Chair, thank you for this report, and as you know, I've been asking about this for a while, so I'm really happy to see it come forward, and I think it's a great plan. Similar to Councillor Bean's question, when I looked at it, the funding that we have now looks like it's going to create about 90 childcare spaces, which is great, but we have a much bigger list than that. So in my opinion, I think it would be great for us to be able to say that this is a valuable enough program that we can make a business case for it. I mean, childcare is so important. It's an important piece for our economy, to keep the economy going, keep parents in the workforce when they want to be. So I think it's great, and I think it's well worth funding it, even if we do not get continued funding from the province. That said, I really hope the province will be giving us the funding that we need to actually expand this and to get the child care spaces that we need, because it really is important.
If I may, a question to the director. In our last conversation with the minister, I know they had negotiated a year with the federal government with regards to that business model that the federal government has presented. Am I correct on that?
Through you, Mayor, yes, our last conversation with the minister, Kate, they had it.
We're not sure exactly where that's going to go from feds to province to municipality. That's the caution. Other questions or comments? Councillor Wardell.
So we have talked about for fund or how do you, I mean, you know, the very serious question and most of the thinking very important. To do update or maybe to spread, can you apply something or how it be done?
Director McElroy, I believe you're asking, can we apply? I think the scenario rests between the province and the federal government. That's where it rests right now. That they're saying, the province is saying to the federal government, we cannot carry forward a $12 a day daycare on the amount of money that you're providing. They call it $10, but they're looking at 12. So that becomes a continued negotiation between the province of Ontario and the federal government of Canada.
Chair, I mean, I know, I remember just, we need to this here, I remember. And that's completely from that, you just give us any like, green light to do something.
Through the chair, that you're talking about delegation.
You mean, that's, yeah.
No, that was something separate. This was the program that we have been looking in for. We did have funding that we could move forward with.
Other comments? Seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried. Next item.
Item 7.5 is the Communities in Bloom request for additional funds, and there is a staff recommendation that the request from Communities in Bloom Advisory Committee for an additional amount of over $4,000 for travel expenses related to sending 4 members of the committee to the Serbia, Sita, and I apologize for doing that, special edition dedication to the 80th anniversary of the Republic Funds of Freedom Roots of Hope be approved, and that the amount funded from the local boards and committee reserve.
I thought you did a great job of that enunciation. A mover for that, Councillor Hunter will move, second by Councillor Niger. Any discussion? Seeing nothing. Councillor Verbeck?
Thank you, good chair. I was just taking a look because further down item 7.9, we do have the reports from the committee's council. So as I'm reviewing some of those annual reports, it came to mind that Stratford for the World came to us last year to have and had a very similar request, which we denied for travel money. So I'm wondering, in fairness, if this is fair for one advisory committee to be funded for the travel expenses, whereas another committee isn't. For the Stratfords of the World, I do notice that we did cover the cost of their registering for the event, so any registration fees were covered. So I'm just putting it out there, but for fairness, I'm probably going to be voting against this.
Okay, and I'm just wondering whether, if a committee would like to bring something forward, then they have the right to bring forward to council as well. Councillor Henderson and Councillor McCabe.
I know that happened last year because we heard that the community in Bloom did get funded. And I know I was told by some of the members of the committee asking why, and I said, well, because we do things all year round, we do things in the city, we do things nationally, we do things globally, and so we're a different committee than the Stratford of the World, so they concentrated on, promoting their cities, Stratfords of the World, and visiting each other, so that we do quite a bit more. Like last year, we held a symposium here in town, over 100 people came, and I think if you read our report, you can see how much our committee does, and then if you want to compare it to Stratford of the World, and I'm not putting either committee down, I'm saying that we do a lot, and these people volunteer to come and go and do the planning, which will be at least 2 days, possibly 3 days of straight 8 hours of planning and doing the work along with Maple Ridge, that we felt we should at least cover half of their expenses, which is more than reasonable, I think.
Councillor McCabe?
I think the historic connection between this community and the Perth Regiment means that we kind of have a special obligation to present at that particular conference, and it seems something appropriate to be doing that in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thanks, through the mayor. When I looked at this, I struggled with how we should be dealing with it. And one of the things that occurred to me that's different from last year is that as a country, we are looking to make economic connections with other parts of the world than just the US trying to cut our alliance. I'm not saying this is necessarily going to lead to a business, but those connections we make around the world, I think, are more important than they used to be. And that's part of the reason that I'm in favor of this one.
And if I could, I'll echo comments made by Councillor McCabe with regards to the military connection. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried, and let the record show that Councillor Beatty did not participate in the discussion and or the vote. Thank you. Next item.
Item 7.6 is the Canada Public Transit Fund Transit Funding Update, and there is a staff recommendation that council authorize the mayor and clerk for their respective delegates to enter into a contribution agreement for CP-001039 capital plan between the City of Stratford and the Federal Ministry of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities for the Canada Public Transit Fund to fund the transit capital projects outlined in the agreement.
Thank you. Mover for that item, moved by Councillor Niger, second by Councillor Burback. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried.
Item 7.7 is the award of a request for proposals for source separated organics processing. And there is a staff recommendation that the proposal RFP-2026-01 for source separated organics processing be awarded to Generate Upcycle, the mayor and clerk or their respective delegates to authorize sign a contract agreement. And then the director of infrastructure services be authorized to extend the contract for an additional 2 one-year terms between April 1st, 2029 to March 31st, 2030 and April 1st, 2030 to March 30th, 2031, subject to successful contract performance and consumer price index increases.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Burback, seconded by Councillor McCabe. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? One opposed, and that's carried.
Item 7.8 is a farm land lease award, and there is a staff recommendation that the proposal RFP-2026-05 for the lease of 150 McCarthy Road West be awarded to Brad DeBoer, operating as Sonova Farm Incorporated. That council authorized staff to prepare and finalize the lease commitment to the property known as 150 McCarthy Road West for an initial period to December 31st, 2027, with 2 one-year options to extend. And then the mayor and clerk for their respective delegates be authorized to sign the lease.
Thank you. Councillor Bean will move, seconded by Councillor Beatty. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's unanimous and carried. Councillor Henderson.
7.2, I wasn't opposed to that, I was just slow reading.
Sorry.
So everybody.
After the fact, I kind of looked at your eyes and it's like, no, but that was carried. Your name wasn't noted. There's no name and shame here, Councillor Henderson. Next item.
Item 7.9 is the 2025 annual reports from committees of council. There is a staff recommendation that the 2025 annual reports from the following committees of council be received for information: Active Transportation Advisory Committee, Heritage Stratford Committee, Accessibility Advisory Committee, Stratford to the World Committee, Communities of Blue Committee, and Energy and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Mover for that. Moved by Councillor Niger, seconded by Councillor Burback. Any discussion? Councillor Burback.
Through the chair, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who serves on these committees. They do work hard and they really enrich our city and bring forward lots of great ideas. So just thanks for everybody who volunteers their time.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Councillor Henderson.
Sure. I really enjoyed reading all the annual reports, and I hope the community do too. I used to sit on the Energy and Environment Committee, and I was just overwhelmed with all they're doing. It's just great to see all they're doing and continuing to add more to them. Same with community bloom and accessibility, and nothing against the other ones, but just how they're all just working for our community, and you know, whether they're making our city more accessible or whether they're making it, you know, but the energy and environment, trying to get rid of invasive species. I mean, I remember when we first sort of started talking about it way back 20 years ago on energy and environment, and you know, it's really hard to eradicate, and good work and all the volunteers that are coming out to help work on it. Congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried.
Item 7.10 is a proclamation for Dairy Week 2026, and there is a motion that Stratford City Council hereby proclaims April 1-4 as Dairy Week in the city of Stratford in celebration of the dairy sector in Kirk County, and authorizes the flying of the dairy produced flag at City Hall during this period in recognition of hard work and dedication behind the food we eat.
Moved by Counselor Beatty, seconded by Counselor McCabe. Any discussion? I'll say at a time where food security is so important in this world, the production on our local farmland and by women and men is key to all of us. So I'll state that as a proud farmer. All in favor? Opposed to any? That's unanimous and carried.
Item 8 is business for which previous notice has been given and there is none noted. There are no standing committee reports to be considered and there was no notice given. Moving to item 11, reading of the bylaws. There are 4 bylaws to for consideration as follows. The first being the Canada Public Transit Fund Transfer Payment Agreement. Item 11.2 is the 2026 tax rates and ratios. Item 11.3 is to authorize a lease agreement for 150 McCarthy Road West. And item 11.4 is to award the proposal for the source separated organics processing proposal, and these bylaws have been taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council president.
Thank you. A mover to take those items collectively. Moved by Counselor Bean, seconded by Counselor Niger. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed to any? That's unanimous and carried. The mover for first and second. Moved by Counselor Hunter, seconded by Counselor Henderson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed to any? That's unanimous and carried. And third and final, moved by Counselor Burback, seconded by Counselor Bean. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed to any? That's unanimous and carried.
Your worship, item 12 is the consent agenda. Are there any items listed on the consent agenda to be considered by council?
Counselor Burback, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. CA 2026-026 is the resolution from the Corporation of Township of Perry regarding reduced rate distribution of library resources. So it's resolution asking the federal government to look at the Canada Post rates, which they're putting up for libraries, where libraries always in the past had a reduced rate. So they're asking the federal government to reconsider.
Thank you. Seconded by Counselor Seven. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed if any? And that's unanimous. Carried. Next item.
Your worship, item 13 is new business. Are there any new business items?
Counselor Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give my thanks to everyone around the horseshoe and all staff that made welcoming our little girl just such a blessed and beautiful time for us. The amount of staff that reached out, citizens, counselors, all the time checking in, it was such a wonderful experience to not go through just once, but twice while on council. And because we are in the shadow of National Women's Day, and we are starting the process of workshops to encourage people to run. This is a place, if you're considering it, that you don't have to choose. That I've grown in my career, I've grown in my family, and I owe that to all of our people. So I just wanted to bring that thanks today, and happy to be back. And when I started this journey, we had a 1-year-old, and now I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Thank you for allowing that to happen, all of them, providing me this opportunity.
Thank you. If I could just build on that, we did have a wonderful Women's International Day breakfast at the Arden Park on Saturday. And prior to that, Patty Jo Lindner, president of the Stratford District Labor Council, invited us, a group of us, to the Army and Navy, and it was a great celebration. And to hear the work that they continue to do for women in the workplace is good to hear and good to support and embrace. So thank you, Councillor Briscoe. Anything else? Next item.
Item 14 is adjournment of standing committees, and there is a motion that the council meeting adjourned and convened in standing committees as follows. First, the Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee, and then the Planning and Heritage Committee, and then to reconvene in the council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hunter, seconded by Councillor Niger. All in favor? Opposed if any? That's unanimous and carried. I'll invite Chair Burback forward for the Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee.
I'd like to call to order the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee. Item 2 is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Item 3 are the subcommittee minutes. Item 4 are delegations, and we have none scheduled. Item 5 is the report of the Director of Environmental Services. 5.1 is the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard 2025 Infrastructure Review. So we have a staff and subcommittee recommendation that the DWQMS Infrastructure Review 2025 be received by Council to fulfill the requirement of the Ontario Drinking Water Quality Management Standard. Councillor McCabe will move the staff recommendation. Councillor Hunter will second. Are there any questions or comments about the report? Seeing none, all in favor? That passes. Thank you. Item 5.2 is the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard 2025 Management Review. And the staff and subcommittee recommendation is that the management review minutes for the 2025 and summary table of actions items 2025 be received by Council to fulfill the requirement of the Ontario Drinking Water Quality Management Standard. Councillor Henderson will move, Councillor Manager will second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Item 6 is the report of the project manager. 6.1 is the Queen Street reconstruction open house and recommendations. And I don't know if anybody wanted to speak to that at all or have any questions relating to it. So Sheldon's going to come forward and give us a little recap.
To the chair, within the 2026 capital budget is the reconstruction of Queen Street, and that's from Region to Brunswick. Project includes full reconstruction, replacement of all underground infrastructure, the road, as well as one sidewalk. City Strip has prepared the design and held a virtual open house February 2nd to the 16th. At that time, residents were able to review the plans and provide comments either through a virtual survey or in person. We received 15 submissions from residents, and there's 67 properties. So roughly a quarter of the properties provided comments. There was a mixture of positive and negative comments. Positive being people looking forward to their road being reconstructed, step past its useful life, as well as appreciation for how the information was displayed. And some of the negative comments were looking for a reassessment of tree conditions. So each time we do a reconstruction, we'll evaluate the health of the trees. So there's back and forth from residents on that, as well as the 3 of the residents expressed concern for elimination of one of the sidewalks. So the street currently has 2 sidewalks. What's being proposed is 1 sidewalk, and that matches the city's policy S2.2, which is the general policy for sidewalk installation for reconstruction project is as follows. The local residential streets with sidewalk on one side. That's what staff has put forward. So I'm here tonight just to present the comments that we did receive and answer any questions you may have. We'll be looking forward to proceeding to tender with your instructions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Henderson.
Jared, just question. How do you decide which side the sidewalk will be mounted on?
So typically we looking for which side the hydro poles are on. There's illumination on that side as well as the Lake City here for grading the boulevard. You have there. In this situation, the street is 2 blocks and hydro poles switch halfway. So we stayed on the east side. It was better for preserving trees as well as in the future if this policy is continued to be applied. The festival is on that side, so there'll be more questions on that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not, thank you. So we do have a recommendation that council receive the design summary for the Queen Street reconstruction project for information. Council approved the design as outlined in the report and as presented at the public open house on Engage Stratford. And that council authorized staff to proceed with construction tender. Oh, Councillor McKay will move. Seconded by Councillor Niger. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Item 7 is the report of the committee coordinator. Council committee coordinator. 7.1 is an encroachment application for 86 Athlone Crescent. And we do have a staff recommendation that the application to permit the encroachment of the tandem parking space at 86 Athlone Crescent on Athlone Crescent Road be allowed, the road allowance be approved, that the annual fee adjusted yearly by CPI be added to the property tax bill, and that the city clerk be directed to prepare a bylaw authorizing the encroachment agreement. Councillor Hunter will move that. Councillor Beatty second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. Item 7.2 is an encroachment application for 17 Nile Street. And again, we do have a recommendation here from staff. Their recommendation, so there were a couple of options presented. The staff recommendation is that option 2 to permit the existing stairs, walkway, fence, and retaining wall to encroach onto Nile Street road allowance be approved, and that the encroachment application to expand the existing driveway be denied, that the annual fee of $92 and change and be adjusted yearly by CPI be added to the property tax bill, and that the city clerk be directed to prepare a bylaw authorizing the encroachment. Councillor Niger will move the staff recommendation. The seconder. Councillor Wardofel will second. Comments or questions? Councillor B.
Thank you, the chair. I prefer option 1 to approve both of the driveways for encroachment. I guess I'm not a huge fan of encroachment things being changed. And what I look at the property, and maybe I'm not understanding correctly, it would be the second driveway on the other side that would not no longer be used, one that has like the garage in. I'm just wondering if I'm correct on that. Okay, so to me, that changes the value of the property. The fact that they had to put 2 cars and then they would only put 1. And I just think sometimes, I don't know how they're very well, but say that sometimes I feel like policy goes ahead of what to me feels like common sense. And if that building is willing to have these 2 driveways, it feels like common sense that they can keep them. So I would have for option 1, so I'll be voting against the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Does any staff follow up?
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, part of the reason why that staff aren't recommending this option here goes back to operational considerations. If you do park a vehicle there, there's a good chance that it'll encroach onto the sidewalk, which creates issues for our sidewalk plows in the wintertime to conduct maintenance. There's a risk there. Also generally creates sightline issues as well. So if someone's trying to back up, and there's a car right adjacent to where they're trying to go, they might not be able to see the pedestrians cross the street. And then lastly, just about accessibility, right? So if someone's going down the sidewalk in mobile chair, they could be restricted. So our largest concern is more to do with ideally a smaller vehicle would be less of an issue, but we can't guarantee that a smaller vehicle will be there. There's a good chance that there'll be a larger vehicle that might approach on the sidewalk, which creates issues. But that's from the staff.
Councillor Bean.
Have we had, sorry, Jared, have we had complaints about cars going on to the sidewalk there? And like from the appearance, the driveway's been there for like 25 years plus or something. So I just don't know if we've had a history of issues.
To the chair, I don't believe any of that information was collected as part of this report.
Councillor Henderson.
Well, I agree, like, I'm not sure, say they have an apartment in that building, and maybe they use that, I don't know. Just thinking, been there a long time. Like, I look at 2009, and it was there, certainly it's been irrigated since then. But
Thank you.
I agree.
Director Treadwell has a response, possibly.
Yeah, just to the chair, just to clarify, the report does mention that it currently meets the length of typical parking spots, so it typically that vehicle could fit there, but I'm just letting you be aware of the issues why staff are not recommending the situation, because if the entire city were to essentially have this exemption, then it might cause a greater issue and have, hundreds or thousands of cars that are able to encroach onto the sidewalk, so.
Follow up.
I just want to say that when I'm looking at the picture here, if you look at September 2012 on the pictures, there's a car there and it would take maybe, say, just a little bit over a half on the driveway, still quite a bit there. I mean, the slope is going down, but I don't know how many has some of it anymore.
Thank you. Just the comment that I would make is that cars are increasingly, our vehicles are getting bigger and bigger. So it's harder and harder to fit onto maybe a parking spot that would have worked 20 years ago. If we allow the encroachment, then if they have a big pickup truck, they'll still be allowed to park it there. Councillor.
How did this come about? Like, it's obviously been in there for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, whatever, maybe longer. Like, why is it an issue now? Were they applying for something? And part of the follow-up is, has the residents agreed to option two or?
Through you, an application would be to widen that driveway off of Coburg Street. So our department processes driveway widenings, consulted with other departments. That's where it was noted that there's an encroachment, and that's where once it was noted that there's an encroachment needed here, it was circulated and went through the process. So they were looking to take that existing driveway that you can see on the Google Street View images and widen it.
So they'll definitely be against this often.
Okay, are there any other further questions or comments? If not, we do have a motion on the floor and I will call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? And that carries. Item 8 is for the information of committee. There's 8.1 is department update. I don't know if there's anything the director wanted to address in the department update. I think it's a lot of tenders going out for things, which is great because it's nice and early and we can get hopefully some good prices on things. But
For the chair, just the one thing I will draw council's attention to is the manager of public works did provide the amount of streets that were facilitating snow clearing this winter, which is quite substantial compared to previous years. So I have not seen this in my 10 years being here. It's been much longer since we've done that much snow hauling, snow clearing off our local streets. And so there is an illustration in your agenda that shows you quite how expensive that was this year.
yes, further to that, I think the report said there was 448 centimeters of snow in Stratford since November. So that's quite a lot of snow, as we all probably noticed. Are there any other questions from the department update? 8.2 are the advisory. Oh, sorry. Councillor Anderson.
I just thought that was interesting, that we had 448 centimeters of snow, but 2,000 truckloads of snow removed.
Yes.
30,000 tons of snow if we do our snow dump. And then just imagine how much is still out in the city. So I think we should thank staff for a remarkable job. I know there was complaints and they're always loading from your house. We're not used to this kind of snow. It was like this when I was a kid. That's a long time ago. We've been used to 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off type thing. And today it's just hardly any snow. Well, I saw snow, but we have a lot going on, but still, I think that's a lot of work for staff.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Point well taken. That our public works staff has done a great job this winter in the face of really daunting conditions. So thank you to them.
Now that snow's melting, I see that there were a lot of potholes.
Yes, so they're on to the next season, and hopefully it'll be a little easier on the complaint side. But I know they've already been out filling potholes, and that does remind me, if you do have a pothole that develops very quickly on your street and it's a major one, please report it to the city through the city website, and it will get attention very quickly. We need your eyes on the ground to let us know where those spots are so that we can take care of them. Okay, 8.2 are the advisory committee outside board minutes for your review, and item 9 is adjournment. Councillor Hunter will move, Councillor Henderson second, all in favor? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Burback, and now I'll invite Chair 7 forward for planning and heritage.
I have to call the Planning and Heritage Committee to order. Item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 3, we have subcommittee minutes for your review. We have no delegations scheduled. Item number 5 is the report of the supervisor of bylaw and compliance. 5.1 is the information on the implementation of the administrative monetary penalty system, or AMPS. Sure, staff would like to speak to this, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much to add. The supervisor has done a great job of providing an update to the committee with regards to AMPS, which is a more effective and a more efficient and hopefully also a more effective way of recovering revenues from the enforcement of municipal bylaws. So an update has been provided here on the next steps. And if there's any questions from committee members, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you. Mayor,
just a question through the chair. With regards to this, I'm always cautious when the province gives us something to do. And I'm just wondering about the need of staff, the need of training, and the need of technology as we move forward, if this is approved.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So council added the supervisor bylaw compliance in the 2026 budget for this. I don't envision staff training with regard to enforcement of bylaws. The implementation of AMPS does come with the need for software, which is currently being reviewed. We are not expecting that to be a significant monetary value for the software. AMPS in itself has been something available to municipalities, and we're towards the later end of uptake of this sort of enforcement method. So this is something that's been around for quite some time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, through the chair. I just had a question about, so if we're taking the job on within the staff, so my understanding is someone will be charged a fee, then they can reject that or challenge that, but then it's adjudicated from within our staff. What kind of, how do we have a transparency or some sort of an oversight that people will feel like confident that we don't have conflict of interest in the adjudication of it?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's first step is a screenings officer. Those would be done by inside staff that would screen to make sure it's not a frivolous or vexatious appeal to the charge being made. That would typically be someone outside of the bylaw department itself, so a neutral, unbiased position within the city. If the appeal moves forward, it goes to what's called a hearings officer, and that would be it could be a contract position, a firm or of some sort, almost like an outside lawyer. That is generally what we see in municipalities are recently retired individuals from the bylaw legal professions that have the experience and knowledge to provide the decisions there. So what staff need to do in their day-to-day doesn't really change much. What it's doing is taking the enforcement and the penalizing of bylaws away from the POA, the Provincial Offences Act, and moving it to a municipal system called AMPS.
Okay. So we do have a subcommittee recommendation that the report titled Information on the Implementation of the Administrative Monetary Penalty Program be received for information, that council support the concept of transitioning the adjudication of bylaw matters away from the current Provincial Offences Act POA system and direct the process to have the city manage and the dispute process.
And that staff be directed to conduct the necessary research and return at a future council meeting with the administrative monetary penalties bylaw, associated policies, set fines related to AMPS, and an implementation plan for council's approval. Councillor McCabe will move, Councillor Burback will second. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Item 5.2 is the proposed exemption from sign bylaw for the Canadian Dairy Expo. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the committee council has seen this request from the Dairy Expo on an annual basis. Their event's coming up in April. This is their request where they place a number of signage and materials and promotional items across our city. So this is an exemption that staff supports. What's different than prior years, or because it comes around every year, is allowing a 3-year permission on this basis, provided nothing changes. So,
thank you, Mayor.
I'll move the staff recommendation and just to indicate that this is a plus for our 16,000 visitors that come and be part of this event.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Bean will second. So the motion is that the request for the variance from the sign bylaw for the Canadian Dairy Expo be approved for a period of 3 years to December 31st, 2028 to permit the installation of 9 temporary sidewalk signs and 1 cow statue for a temporary period of approximately 7 to 10 days, coinciding with the Dairy Expo event in late March to early April on city-owned property, and the locations are listed there. Is there any discussion or questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Item number 6, we have a department update. Director Betridge.
Yes, through Mr. Chair, I can give a quick verbal update. Council has recently listened to the supervisor of planning policy and placemaking with regard to an update for the official plan, so that's moving forward diligently. The building division has been quite active. So despite we seeing slowdowns in other areas of the province, particularly the GTA, we're quite busy here in Stratford. In fact, we've had amongst the most busiest years over the last 7 have been in the last 3, with a number of dwelling units starting comprising of townhouse dwelling units and apartments. So kudos to the building division for keeping up with that, but also our building community and the development community in general for bringing housing to Stratford. And on the bylaw front, I just gave an update about AMPS. So staff are getting, it's the season is upon us for the accommodations, the bed and breakfasts. So it'll be, in general, staff are working diligently on the AMPS program.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Bedrich? Seeing none. Item 6.2, there are Heritage Stratford Advisory Committee minutes from January 13th for your review, and item number 7 is adjournment. I have a mover, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Burback, the second. All in favor? Or adjourned.
Thank you. There are 7 reconvened and clerk.
Returning to your regular council agenda, item 15 is council reconvened, and 15.1, are there any declarations to be restated on the standing meetings?
None noted.
Item 15.2, reading confirmatory bylaw requires first and second readings and third and final.
Move for first and second by Councillor Hunter, second by Councillor Niger. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried. Third and final, made by Councillor Burback, second by Councillor Seven. Any discussion? None noted, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried. And our final item, looking at the clock at the wall, it's only 5 after 8. A motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Burback, second by Councillor Bean. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous and carried. And thank you to staff, council, and visitors, especially our press corps back there doing their job. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.